In Elden Ring, both sorceries and incantations are common, and you'll encounter many enemies wielding their power. But have you ever wondered what the narrative mechanics of doing magic is, beyond pressing R1? Let's do a deep dive into the magic system of Elden Ring. Let's start out with the basics. What is actually required for casting an incantation or a spell? You need to have the spell memorized, enough FP to cast a spell, the required stats, intelligence, faith or arcane for the spell, and a catalyst, either a staff for sorceries or a seal for incantations. So let's start dissecting these requirements, starting with memorization. It appears rather straightforward that one would want to memorize the steps required for casting a spell beforehand, so one does not need to call a timeout during battle to read up on the steps again. The second requirement for casting a spell is FP. If you're like me, you read the description for FP and immediately forgot what it stands for, as it basically functions like mana. Let me remind you, FP stands for focus points. This points to the need to focus your mind to correctly invoke sorceries or incantations, and after focusing for a long time, you tire, needing rest. It seems like in this magic system, there is no mana or other supernatural essence used up for the casting of magic or incantations. The part that produces the magic is our mind. But what are you focusing your mind on while casting a spell? I believe the answer to be visualization. Enya tells us,
"For the flame to burn the earth tree, a sacrifice is needed of one who envisions the flame."
As a side note, the Japanese uses the words
宿す
meaning contain and
原子
meaning vision or visual hallucination. The imbuing of the flame is definitely a form of magic. The sacrifice harboring flame inside would make a lot of sense narratively for a way to strengthen the flame. But what is required is not flame itself, but the sacrifice envisioning flame. The visualization appears to be a crucial part of performing the magic. We can find a second example of this process spelled out in the Catch Flame incantation, which is an incantation the Prophet class starts with. It states, "Incantation originating from a sinister prophecy. The flame of ruin is anathema to the Earth Tree." But prophets sometimes glimpse it within the faith all the same. Sadly, when this occurs, their sole reward is banishment. It is also taught by Brother Corhin, a staunch believer of the Golden Order who, according to Corhin's robe, refused to recant his prophecies. Neither the Prophet nor Brother Corhin would have any reason to go out of their way to specifically learn or invent this incantation after their banishment to the land between. And the Prophet certainly wouldn't have had the time. The prophecy in the form of a vision literally made flames spark from their hands. And visualizing it again results in flames erupting anew. We see the process of how an incantation is created before our very eyes. Finally, a third example can be found in the Founding Rain of Stars, thought to be the founding Glintstone sorcery. The glimpse of the primeval current that the astrologer saw became real, and the stars' amber rained down on this land. Again, the astrologer caught a glimpse of something, and this resulted in what he saw materializing in the real world. The inspiration for this was likely Berserk. When Shirke teaches Lady Farnes magic, the first thing she learns is to visualize an apple, and states that tangibly imagining a phenomenon in your mind is the first step towards becoming a magic user. Visualization is conceptually really similar to magic. When you close your eyes, there is only darkness at first, but out of nothing, you conjure up an image. And this creation from nothing translates to the real world. Your consciousness is the origin of magic. The magic circle is part of what you visualize, and this actually manifests it in the world, visible to everyone. But there are simply helpful visualization aids for phenomena, and some high-level spells do not exhibit any magic sigil when cast, like Comet Azure or Founding Rain of Stars. I believe the gestures the character performs while casting function similarly, through helping one embody a phenomenon, making visualization easier and more salient through kinesthetic learning. So coming back to our requirements, we have explained the need for spell memorization and FP. So let's turn our attention towards the stats requirements next. Most sorceries require intelligence, while most incantations require faith, pointing towards a difference in methodology between the two factions. The core of sorcery is understanding. Sorcerers dedicate their life to study. They have built academies, study halls, and countless rises jam-packed with books in pursuit of knowledge. From the description of Terra Magica, this spell allows such vivid experience of spellcasting success. It turns many a fledgling into a true sorcerer in a flash of newfound understanding. A deep understanding of the underlying principles of magic is required for sorceries to command power, and what they study would be classified as natural sciences in our world. The stars, the moon, crystals, cold temperatures, magma, and gravity, among others. The sigil of gravity sorceries are literally gravitational field lines. As in the real world, scientific study confers powers unimaginable to those unfamiliar with the concepts. But this is represented a bit more literally in Elden Ring. If you do understand the laws of nature, you will be able to judge what they can and cannot do. Therefore, your visualization will depict the underlying concepts more faithfully, increasing your magic power and directing the power of the natural principles in the most effective way, utilizing them to their full potential. But how do incantations and faith fit into all of this? I will argue that the core of all magic is understanding, and faith is an alternate route to understanding. When we meet Brother Corhin for the first time, he will tell us,
I teach incantations, the strength granted us by the two fingers, and explore the secrets of the Golden Order.
What Corhin speaks of here is an active pursuit of knowledge, religious knowledge. Goldmask is in constant deep contemplation, and Corhin, seeking his instruction, attempts to comprehend his wisdom. In Christianity, faith changes throughout a practitioner's life. It causes one to seek greater understanding of God, and as a result, to grow in faith. Many religious practitioners experience doubts or even a crisis of faith in their lives, and overcoming these trials can move the practitioner from a superficial belief towards a more profound and personal understanding of God. Corhin as well, when given a heretical prayer book after meeting Goldmask, will state,
I cannot afford to maintain my innocence any longer. I must dirty my hands to test my faith.
But some go even deeper. Fideists believe that faith gives one access to a level of understanding that one cannot get through human reasoning. Faith as a separate faculty of the human mind, superior even. Regardless of which of those two positions you believe better explains the magic system, understanding is at the heart of incantations as well, resolving the question why stats requirements exist for casting magic. Now for a final requirement, catalysts. The Japanese word
触媒
literally means catalyst and is meant in a chemical sense, as a substance that increases the rate of a chemical reaction without being consumed. Interestingly, the word
触媒
is a combination of
触
meaning contact or touch with
媒
meaning mediator or go-between. So, for incantations, a seal is needed, and incantations are strongly tied to a specific powerful entity. As an aside, I think lore-wise, you need to have a seal associated with the specific entity you want to use incantations from, but this was likely scrapped for gameplay reasons. The word seal has multiple potential meanings in English. A mark proving an identity, like a wax seal or a stamp, or a hermetic seal, preventing a substance escaping a vessel, ignoring the sea mammal. But looking at the original Japanese word,
印
it's clear the former, not the latter,
封印
as in selling seal breaker or Academy Glintstone key, is meant. As a side note, this
印
is the same word used for the description of Marika's scar seal and sword seal. It likely also means the seal is not supposed to seal the inflammation, but rather that the eye has become inflamed after the seal has been placed. Here we see that one needs a sort of symbol of the powerful entity to wield their power. Looking at the different seals, one thing immediately stands out. 4 of the different seals are described as formless,
幻影
indicating a sort of intangible existence. Just for clarification, in Japanese, a different word
姿なき
is used for formless mother, indicating more of a shapeless or unseen existence. The formless serpents, referenced in the serpent bow, use the same word
姿なき
as the formless mother, probably stressing more the being invisible part of the job of an assassin. This is also a different word from the coded sword or the cipher pata, which uses
実体ない
or,
実体のない
but also points towards intangibility. The silver tier husk uses yet another word,
不定形
indicating more of an unstructured or protean interpretation. Finally, the intangible mentioned in the Flock's canvas talisman uses
形なき
which could be interpreted as any of the above. So, multiple items associated with the higher powers invoked in incantations are somehow only partially able to interact with our reality. When looking a bit closer at Mo's initial meeting with the formless, supposedly invisible Mother of Truth, we see that the word
見えた
has been seen, was visible, appeared, is used. It seems an invisible entity suddenly became visible specifically to Mo. There are multiple phenomena which can only be perceived by some inhabitants of the lands between. Most Tarnished cannot see Grace anymore. Only Hayata is capable of seeing the distant light of the frenzied flame, and Roderica can hear the voices of the spirits, which Nefeli is incapable of sensing. Why can some individuals perceive these while others cannot? Roderica is said to have a talent, so there seems to be a sort of innate predisposition that some people are born with regarding a specific phenomenon. But one can increase one's capacity of interacting with the supernatural, as we see with Hayata consuming the Shapriri grapes. On the other hand, it seems possible to lose it as well, as many Tarnished have. It is likely that extreme situations, especially involving strong emotions, can temporarily heighten one's senses of perceiving the supernatural. Romina, only when everything burned down, discovered scarlet rot. The Outer God heirloom speaks of a twisted deity glimpsed in the shadow of a corpse of an ancestor after losing everything to the great fires. Similarly, dampening one's senses helps perceive what is commonly overshadowed. Shabruri had his eyes gouged out, and the flame of frenzy came to dwell in the empty sockets. But it does not seem like there is a predisposition to the supernatural in general. Otherwise, Roderica would be parading around with a cahoot of outer gods, using every incantation in existence. The predisposition towards a certain supernatural entity seems to decrease one's predisposition towards others, especially the similar ones. There seems to be little conflict between using both Earthry and Golden Order incantations, But there is not a single instance of an enemy mixing frenzy with other incantations. Looking further at the users of incantations, there is a trend of similarity within the groups. The ones susceptible to the flame of frenzy cannot bear the suffering any longer. Worshippers of the formless mother are enraptured by bloodlust, and those wielding Mesmer's flame share a religious fervor to burn the impure. The worshippers resemble the entity they worship in some ways. Why is that? Because only concepts with sufficient similarity to each other can interact. This is also true in particle physics. Charged particles interact with other charged particles through electromagnetic fields. Particles with mass can interact with other particles with mass through gravitational fields. Quarks and gluons interact through the color charge. Particles with weak isospin can interact with bosons. Two particles with no similarity whatsoever cannot interact. So, assuming these higher beings to be massless and unaffected by gravity, chargeless, colorless, and with no weak isospin, they have no real way of interacting with our reality. Except, maybe in Elden Ring, there is an additional metaphysical property of concept. The same concepts manifesting in higher beings, nature, and humans, making them capable of interacting with each other through a metaphysical connection. The followers of a higher being are on a similar wavelength, capable of sending and receiving information. So higher beings seem mostly incapable of interacting with the real world directly, requiring a conduit to influence the lands between. A mutually beneficent agreement. But how exactly does this communication between higher beings and humans work? We see this when Moog discovered blood oath incantations through meeting an outer god. Mogwin's sacred spear states, as well as serving as a weapon, it is an instrument of communion with an outer god who bestows power upon accursed blood. So Moog communes with an outer god, but what is meant with the word communion? In Christianity, communion is a sacrament where believers symbolically consume the body of Christ. However, looking at the Japanese text, it is quite clear that communication
更新
instead of the Eucharist
生産
is implied. As a side note, dragon communion is literally called
硫酸
dragon eating in Japanese, and the confluence of these two words seems merely incidental. The same word for communication
更新
is also used for the two fingers consulting the greater will. What is significant is that
更新
is used for two-way exchanges or linking up with another specific entity. So, when a human sees a higher being, the higher being sees the human as well. This is the giant eye in the sky in the frenzied flame ending, a higher being perceiving the world. The third eye in the fire giant's chest is the fell god looking directly at us. The high priest hat has a circular design said to represent the greater will and its lightless abyss, but the black opening is eerily reminiscent of a pupil. Meteor's microcosm looks like an eye with an iris around it, which I believe is literally the greater will looking. If you stare into the abyss stares back. There is power in seeing and being seen. There is something intimate about the moment when eyes meet. A non-verbal connection is formed, a shared understanding, and an affirmation of the existence of both sides. So in conclusion, seals are symbols of higher powers that facilitate the connection between them and the human. But how do sorceries fit into all of this? For casting sorceries, you require a glintstone staff, a staff with inlaid glintstone. Selen tells us,
Our art draws upon the powers embedded in Glintstone. But what is the nature of such power? Glintstone is the amber of the cosmos. Golden amber contains the remnants of ancient life and houses its vitality, while Glintstone contains residual life, and thus the vitality of the stars. It should not be forgotten that Glintstone's sorcery is the study of the stars and the life therein, a fact lost on most sorcerers these days.
this is a well-known fact in the community, but it is not quite clear what exactly is meant with residual life. Looking closer at the Japanese, it might just be different translations of remnants, but remnants of the life of the stars. Regardless, it is quite clear that Glintstone is a form of crystallized life. This can be seen quite clearly through the staff of the guilty, a heretical staff fashioned from a smouldering, withered sapling that turns the blood of sacrifices pierced by it into glintstone. Here we can see how glintstone is created before our very eyes. The blood of sacrifices, containing some of their vitality, becomes red glintstone. Nearly all staves in the game contain a glintstone, but there are two exceptions: the Prince of Death's staff and the Staff of Loss. The Prince of Death's staff states, "Staff embedded with solid amber, said to be a very part of the Prince of Death." So this is a staff not with glintstone, but the previously mentioned golden amber. Therefore, the crux of whether you can cast sorceries is not in the special nature of glintstone itself, but the crystallized vitality within. Finally, there is the Staff of Loss, which is a staff missing its glintstone. One might think that this disproves the theory that a form of crystallized life is required for casting sorceries, but let's see what else it says. Wielded by sorcerers who believe that discovery comes through acts of asceticism. This staff only distinguishes itself when casting invisibility sorceries, but that is reason enough for some to wield it. This staff enhances invisibility sorceries, which might point to the glintstone simply being invisible, like the spells it's designed to cast. On the other hand, it is wielded by ascetics, which could use similar mechanics to the Staff of the Guilty by crystallizing life into glintstone. But this time, the ascetic's life is the one being crystallized, potentially even inside their body. A process we can see happening to many of the sorcerers we meet. So we have established that a form of crystallized life is required for casting sorceries. This is even true for animals. When inspecting the concept art for the Red Wolf of Radagon, we can see he is wearing a small glintstone earring. Taking a step back now, one could state that sorceries do the exact same thing as incantations, borrowing power from the stars, the moon, and night. The connection is established through a symbol of the higher power, in this case, glintstone. Thinking about it this way, there does not seem to be a clear dividing line anymore between sorceries and incantations. But one cannot cast sorceries with a seal, regardless of the similarities. So what is the fundamental difference between sorceries and incantations? It is the powers they're drawing from. But what powers they're drawing from, and why there is a fundamental split, we'll have to explore next time. I hope you enjoyed this video, and of course, constructive criticism is always helpful. I tried to up the quality of my voiceover performance a little, so let me know if you notice a difference and if it's better now or in my previous videos. Thanks a lot for watching.